Hi, Michelle. Can they hear me?
They should be able to hear you at this point. Yes.
Hi, Lori. Hi, Cindy. Wow, yeah, it's working.
Wonderful. So just want to welcome everybody here to our lecture, part of the Maritime Heritage Lecture Series. This one is Wales in North Carolina, presented by Keith Rittmaster. The next lecture in our series will be on Thursday at 11, and that is one done actually by me, Christine Bryn, about sea monsters and the origins of some of the most popular stories, legends out there. During this presentation, we will be recording it and ultimately making it available through the museum's website. If you have any questions during the presentation, Keith has actually included in the presentation a number of, I think he said about 3 or 4 slides that say questions. We will be going over the questions at that time, but during the presentation, if you do find you have questions, go ahead and put them into the chat box, either on Zoom if you're watching through Zoom, or on Facebook if you're watching through the museum's Facebook page. We are monitoring both of those comments and those chats, and we'll ultimately relay those questions and messages to Keith at the point where he hits those question slides. Without further ado, unless anybody has any questions, I'm going to hand the floor over to Keith.
Okay, hope you can hear me. Uh-oh, this is being recorded. I better watch what I say. So I'm here in the Bonehenge Whale Center at the Maritime Museum's Gallant Channel property. It's an appropriate place to talk about whales. Not quite open for public visitation yet, but coming soon, I hope. So in the next 40 minutes or so, I'm going to cover these topics very briefly as they relate to whales in North Carolina. If I slip into taxonomic jargon, I may call them cetaceans, which is a taxonomic term that refers to whales, dolphins, and porpoises. Just to try to introduce you to the differences between baleen whales or mysticetes and toothed whales or odontocetes. The upper left photo is a baleen whale, the most common one we see in North Carolina. And they lack teeth, and that is baleen attached to the upper jaw, and they use the baleen to feed. Whoops. And on the bottom right, a bottlenose dolphin, technically a small toothed whale, showing a mouthful of teeth. So of course, as you might suspect, toothed whales or odontocetes have teeth. This poster represents all of the cetaceans, whales, dolphins, and porpoises on Earth as of its publication, or known to science, as of its publication about 11 years ago. In this poster, all the baleen whales are facing to the right. The biggest animal on Earth is and if you said blue whale, you're right. It's a baleen whale on the upper left. Here's a fun fact. The biggest animal on Earth is a girl, because in blue whales, and I think most, possibly all baleen whales, at least as far as we know, girls are bigger than boys. In this poster, the toothed whales are facing to the left. The sperm whale is the biggest toothed whale by far, and in the sperm whales, males get much bigger than females. Our bottlenose dolphin is a small toothed whale. But here's the thing about North Carolina, which blows my mind. Over the past 35 years of records, maybe a little more than that, we have documented 34 species, living species of whales in North Carolina. Here I've circled all of the toothed whales. And you might be surprised to see killer whales circled, but we have documented killer whales, both alive and as dead or live stranding in one case. And now I'm going to circle all the baleen whales that we've documented in North Carolina. And put it all together, it gets pretty messy, and that's 34 species. I'm not bragging. I would work hard to prove me wrong, but as far as I can tell, that's more than any other state. And We believe there's various reasons for that, but I just want to emphasize that North Carolina is a whale diversity hotspot on this planet, and we've been able to document that. At the risk of oversimplifying this too much, I just want to introduce you to the fact that whales were hunted in North Carolina. The 3 species I represent here were the main targets, but many other species were taken, and a lot of it was opportunistic. Sperm whales were targeted generally offshore because that's their habitat, near the continental shelf edge, and that was called pelagic whaling in the early days from sailing ships and small boats launched from those ships. And then steamships and exploding harpoons came along. Right whales were taken offshore, but also from shore here in North Carolina. And bottlenose dolphins were also harpooned and netted off our coast here. This artistic rendering shows, the title says whale on beach in Beaufort. Unmistakably a right whale because it has no dorsal fin and it's a baleen whale. And this was the primary target of whalers from our shores. They would row out in a boat with a harpoon and a lance and other implements of destruction to kill the whales and bring them to shore. No dorsal fin. A right whale is the only cetacean in North Carolina that lacks a dorsal fin. They have a smooth back. If you live in this county, or even if you just visited this county, you have most likely seen one of these images, particularly the black and white one on the upper right. This is the county seal and the county coat of arms. And once upon a time, some group of county leaders and artists felt right whales were important enough to this county, Carteret County, to feature on every building, piece of stationery, every vehicle, every website. And so this is these are right whales. How can you tell? Primarily, they lack a dorsal fin. I am pleased to say, although many think they're teetering on the brink of extinction with only around 360 left on Earth, the North Atlantic right whale can still be seen off our shores. And this is a mom. Her head is near us right there, facing to the right, and her newborn baby, darker, behind it, facing to the left. And yes, we still see right whales off our shores, and we don't hunt them anymore, but we sure are managing to kill them by ship strikes, and entanglement seem to be the main killers of right whales. This photo I just got off the web trying to get a little update on the reproductive season of right whales, and I just love this photo. This is the nicest photo, kind of endearing. A right whale calf there appearing to nuzzle the mom here. And researchers studying right whales use these growths on the top of the head called callosities to identify individual whales, to document migration routes, migratory endpoints, birth rates, associations, and things like that. A process called photo identification. So every right whale mom, I believe, is well known. There probably isn't 100 of them left, but they are all known to science. Oh, and the update I just put on the bottom of the screen, 17 live calves documented so far this season. So that's up from the last 3 seasons, and that is reason for optimism. And I don't, cautious optimism, but they are giving birth, and the calves, for the most part, are surviving. One calf was lost to a ship strike. That was just a total bummer. And the first calf of the year this season was a stranding on North Core Banks right near here. It apparently died during birth. and we don't know who the mom of that one is yet. But 17 live babies is good news. And just to put it into context, this graph shows the reproduction of North Atlantic right whales over the past 15 or so, 14 or 15 years. So in 2021, you can see we're up to 17. In 2018, it was just very depressing. Zero births were documented, and many deaths, human-caused deaths. So we're hoping this is the beginning of an upward trend in right whale births. More could be seen this year. Newborns are born well into April, so we could actually see more. Sperm whales, generally in the early days, a large sailing ship with smaller whale boats would be launched and target sperm whales. This is an artistic rendering of killing a sperm whale. And it was a sperm whale that came ashore at Cape Lookout alive and then died on the beach in 2004. And that is the specimen that's on display at the North Carolina Maritime Museum, Echo. And I'm pleased to say, although hunted to the brink of extinction in many parts of their range, you go offshore in North Carolina any time of year to near the continental shelf edge. If you don't see sperm whales with a hydrophone, you can hear them. And they have a very distinctive sound, and researchers can identify the species very easily, sometimes learn more about individuals from their sounds. Here's a curious thing. Deeper divers tend to have more plastic in their stomachs. And that is the case with most of the sperm whales that have come ashore in North Carolina. And this is an example of the entire stomach contents of one young live sperm whale that came ashore in North Carolina. So it's another conservation issue, is the ingestion of plastic. It seems to be particularly common in the deeper divers like sperm whales, kogias, and beaked whales. And now we're going to have an acoustic intermission. To a whale, particularly toothed whales, because we know more about sounds of toothed whales, of which a sperm whale is. Their world is sound, much like ours is vision. Yes, they have eyes, they can see, but they do more with sound, it appears. So when I mentioned if you don't see sperm whales offshore, you can most likely hear them. This is an example of their sounds. Whalers used to call them the carpenter fish. No, they're not fish, but they were referring to the sounds they make, because instead of what you might think of as whale sounds like humpback songs or dolphin clicks and whistles, these sound like a hammer hitting a nail on the head, is what the old whalers thought. So let's see, I hope this works, and Christine will speak up if it's not.
Keith, I'm not hearing it.
We're not hearing that.
Okay, so remember under share screen, you have to click share screen, and then it's going to say share computer audio.
Thank you. I'm in I can't find the Zoom thing, but okay.
It should be when you click the share screen on the bottom menu, along the bottom of this, it won't show me his Zoom screens.
You are screen sharing.
Yes, along the bottom of it, it should say when you hit share screen, the window that comes up, there should be along the bottom of it a couple different things you can click, and one of them says share audio, share computer sound, bottom left. So when you click.
Okay.
Do you see what I'm talking about?
Whoa. Wild things just happened on my computer. I've never seen this before. Maybe that's your computer.
Oh, did I just share screen by? I did. Sorry, that's me. Sorry,
Okay.
my bad.
All right,
Okay,
we got
go
this.
ahead and hit share screen. Everybody got to see my beautiful desktop full of.
Oh man, I panicked. Okay.
You got it.
All right, we got this.
You got it. I believe in you.
All
Yep.
right.
You're on share screen, and then you click the share computer audio.
Okay.
There you go. Goodness.
Okay, I hope that worked. Anyway, I was told that that was 3 sperm whales making a variety of the sounds. From our perspective, there's not much to it, but researchers think that those sounds are very, very important to sperm whales and carry a lot of information. North Carolina porpoise fishery. If you want to learn more about it, you'd have to actually look for porpoise fishery, and that's what it was called in scientific journals and even popular literature. But I assure you, they weren't fish and they weren't porpoises as far as I can tell. And I've examined a lot of these photos. Let me see if I can get this out of the way. And as far as I could tell, everything represented our bottlenose dolphins. And so they were hunted in North Carolina, primarily for the lower jaw oil, but other parts were used. And even they were used for live display one time. North Carolina porpoise fishery, which was actually hunting bottlenose dolphins. And I would like to advance my slide. Okay, and there's another picture, and I've examined every one of these, and they all look like bottlenose dolphins. And it is a good time to stop for questions. And if any of them come to Christine through the chat, I love questions.
I haven't received any questions through the chat, and I don't believe, and Cindy hasn't relayed any through Facebook at this point. So
Okay,
I'm
well,
going to go with, you are doing such a great presentation. Everyone is right on the same
Or-
page. Yeah.
or sound asleep. Anyway, be bold. There will be another opportunity for questions. Our local bottlenose dolphins. And this is the only cetacean, the only whale you're likely to see year round from the beaches, docks, piers, and the sounds, rivers along the shoreline in North Carolina. Bottlenose dolphins. People will tell you, hey, look at the porpoises. I don't care if you correct them, but I want to emphasize that what you're seeing with the dorsal fin that's breathing air, this is something super unusual, which could happen, would be bottlenose dolphins. Porpoises do occur in North Carolina. I've never seen a live one, mostly in February, mostly Dare County. Dead juvenile harbor porpoises come ashore. That's the only porpoise we have on the East Coast. And researchers, including us, photographed the dorsal fins, and for study, for photo ID, for identification, we use the scars and the notches that they acquire to identify individual dolphins. And it is the bottlenose dolphins that almost exclusively associate with humpback whales and other large whales we've seen off the shoreline. It's very rare that I see a large whale and there aren't bottlenose dolphins there. They appear to be harassing it. So this is a bottlenose dolphin in the foreground and a humpback whale in the background near Cape Lookout Bight, and that's not unusual. The most frequently sighted large whale seen from our beaches are humpback whales, what is pictured here and here. So researchers studying humpback whales use photo ID on the tails. The color patterns and the edge is very unique for every individual. And this is the bottom, the ventral side of the tail, which is helpful to identify whales. And we're learning about migratory endpoints and seasonality with humpbacks. This, I don't want to lead anyone to believe, go to North Carolina and all these whales, you can go see them. Generally, you won't see them. This is the time of year you might see a large whale off the beach, November through April, occasionally into May, but there just aren't that many. And if you look carefully, you might see evidence that this humpback whale has survived an entanglement. And those straight lines coming up the tail flukes right there and right there are evidence of this whale having been entangled. Speaking of humpback whales being entangled, I'm going to introduce you to our Marine Mammal Stranding Network and the organizations that have a leadership role. And we get the calls, ideally, of every dead or dying or entangled marine mammal. I haven't put the phone number up here, but every aquarium, museum, Coast Guard, police know to call the hotline, which my wife, Vicki Thayer, generally holds. And this is a humpback whale that was brought to my attention off Fort Macon several years ago. And it was bloody and it was injured and it was entangled in a coastal monofilament gill net. This is the cork line you see wrapped around the tail. And something happened to this whale, which I had never seen before. It actually managed to get out of this entanglement and swim away. And we were able to collect the entire net and bring it on board 3 boats that we had out there. So although the whale might not agree, this was a success story because there was not a lethal entanglement. Here's a strange case. This gentleman reported a strange behaving dolphin off his dock at Morgan Creek Landing, maybe a mile from the Maritime Museum, even less. And when we got there, I could tell it was not a dolphin. It was a Kogia. It's a taxonomic genus that includes dwarf sperm whales and pygmy sperm whales. And their habitat is beyond the continental shelf edge. I mean, this was an animal way out of its habitat. And I kind of feared that it was in trouble, but I couldn't tell what might have been wrong with it. But we organized some volunteers to keep an eye on it over here at Morgan Creek Landing through the night, and eventually it washed ashore dead the next morning. And here it is, adult male dwarf sperm whale. So they're hard to spot, hard to identify. We don't know a whole lot about them in North Carolina, and we couldn't determine a cause of death. But for this specimen, we actually made a skeleton of it because as far as I could determine, there was no skeleton on display of a dwarf sperm whale, and it is North Carolina wildlife, so I wanted to represent it. So this is the skeleton, and it's been traveling a bit, but now we have it in the Bonehenge Whale Center. Killer whales. I don't think anyone would associate killer whales with North Carolina, but this picture shows the one stranding, happened to be a live stranding that was eventually towed offshore. I'm not sure how long it might have survived. Unmistakably a killer whale because of the white eye patch and the black and white color patterns. But then this was from the 1970s. But since then, many reliable reports, videos, and photos of killer whales in North Carolina, video from the beach or from boats, have documented this species. 3 of the 4 species of beaked whales that we see or documented in North Carolina, beaked whales are kind of hard to spot and identify offshore. And most of the ones I encounter are dead or dying on the beach. Although I've seen some offshore. This Cuvier's beaked whale on top. True's beaked whale, which has a neat Beaufort, North Carolina story because the holotype, the type specimen, the first ID'd stranding of this species came ashore across from the Maritime Museum, before it was the Maritime Museum, on Bird Shoal. And scientists scratched their heads and couldn't identify it, and eventually it earned a new name, True's beaked whale, discovered in Beaufort, North Carolina, and Gervais beaked whale on the lower right. Meet Pitfall. Pitfall was a 3-year-old, 37-foot humpback whale when she was struck by a ship and killed. That's my friend Bruce lying next to it for scale. So this was a big girl. And when she was struck by that ship, her skull was broken in 2 pieces, and one of her lower jaws was cracked. And we actually designed this Bonehenge Whale Center to tell this story, to display this specimen. We do have all the bones on a rack behind me right there. And I just mentioned this to highlight another conservation issue. I've mentioned ingesting plastic and entanglement, and ship strikes is another cause of death that we are able to determine too regularly. What's my friend Greg holding? If you're a fisher, you know that that's a dolphin fish, also called dorado, mahi-mahi. And the fishermen I know, when they see the mammals, they call them porpoises, even when they're looking at dolphins. I don't care if you correct them, but I just want you to know that what you're seeing here in North Carolina are dolphins, and this fish is fun to catch, delicious to eat, cold-blooded, has gills, lays eggs, very different from the mammal dolphin. But when fishermen talk about dolphin, this is what they're talking about. And when they see a dolphin mammal, they often call it a porpoise. Well, this is a harbor porpoise, dead. This is the only species of porpoise we have on the East Coast here. If you wanted to see them, go in the Bay of Fundy or up around the Gaspé Peninsula in July and August, and they're regularly seen up there. In the wintertime, they head south. New Jersey, Virginia is not unusual. North Carolina, again, I've not seen a live porpoise in North Carolina, nor have I received a reliable report of a live porpoise, except for 2 instances of dying porpoises in North Carolina. I hope that makes sense. They're very different than bottlenose dolphins, a more triangular dorsal fin, smaller altogether. They don't have a prominent snout. And their teeth are very different as well. We're working on 2 skeletal displays, both sub-adult females. The harbor porpoise are flattened teeth, sort of like spatula shaped on the left, and the bottlenose dolphins are triple the size and conical teeth on the right. Stephanie, our graphics wizard, created this for me, which I love. It helps me explain the difference between bottlenose dolphin in the back, harbor porpoise overlaid, and a dolphin fish in front. I hope that's helpful. Oh, another acoustic intermission. This is a group of 17 bottlenose dolphins. Now I'll just briefly introduce you to sound production in toothed whales. I'm squishing air under my tongue. Toothed whales squish air back and forth in nasal sacs as far as we can tell. Many of the sounds are created there. They are focused and amplified through this organ called a melon, M-E-L-O-N. Much like a magnifying glass can focus and amplify light, the melon appears to focus and amplify the sound. And most of the hearing, we believe, is done through the lower jaw, and the ears are right back there. This is a group of 17 bottlenose dolphins, one winter day off Shackleford Banks. And I want you to listen for their variety of sounds. Whistles, flowing sounds. I think most people believe that there are signature whistles, which I yeah, I think everyone agrees. Listen for echolocation clicks, pulsed sounds, used much like sonar to perceive their environment. Sometimes it sounds like a squeaky screen door. And listen for a bang. It's always preceded by echolocation clicks, like and that bang sounds like a cap gun or a distant gunshot. And I believe that's a sound that's so focused, powerful, loud, it can kill or stun a fish. And that's been demonstrated in video in a couple cases. But anyway, let's see if this sound works, and we'll have a listen. So I call that the dolphin's greatest hits because every sound I've ever heard them make is in that little sound clip. I believe they were doing deep dives and feeding. And most of those sounds, I have no clue what they mean, but your assignment, and it's due Monday, is to translate all that into English. So there. Good time for questions if anyone has any.
Okay, so I have a couple questions for you. One came through Facebook. It said, awesome presentation. It's our youngest daughter is wondering, why would they kill bottlenose dolphins?
That's a good question. This is before the days of petroleum or fossil fuels. And so dolphins were a source of rarely food, but leather and oil. Oil for heating, oil for lighting, oil for lubrication. And that is why. And I think not much was understood about them, and the killing was unsustainable. It was just their reproductive potential isn't very great. So it became disastrous for dolphins. But that's why they would kill dolphins.
And that kind of leads into a second question I have here, which is from Helen about what is the melon filled with?
So the melon, if you cut into the melon of a dead dolphin, which I've done several times, it's really fatty tissue. Oil just pours out of fatty tissue. It's not as, it seems to be a little harder than blubber, but it varies within the melon. There's no bone, there's no muscle, and it's covered in skin. And as you cut toward the cranium, you start to run into those nasal sacs, those air sacs that create the sound. So I hope that helps. Hi, Helen. Maybe I'll demonstrate for you someday.
And then there was also, Helen wanted to comment that she has some photos of dolphin skins that were used for leather from the cetacean warehouse that she's going to send you.
Thank you. I don't have those. That'd be great. That will enhance my presentations.
And I think those were the two main questions and comments we had. So,
all right. Well, keep them coming, and I'll carry on. I think I'm almost through here. Oh, I just wanted to emphasize the diversity and present to you just some photos of other live dolphins that we have documented off North Carolina. I'm not going to go into each species, but most of them North Carolinians have never heard of. Some of them we don't know much about. Atlantic spotted dolphin on the middle left is possibly the most abundant cetacean off our coast, but you're not likely to see healthy ones anywhere within 5 miles of the beach. But there are a lot of them out there. So anyway, cetacean diversity in North Carolina. Pilot whales, they can be found predictably, mainly north of Cape Hatteras, but they've been seen here. They've stranded here, dead and alive, and their habitat is further offshore. Again, I've seen them close to the beach one time off of around Avon, north of Hatteras, but generally you won't see them close to the beach, pilot whales. But the main story I want to end with is this. There's a new to science species of whale. It was named Rice's whale this January. It is endemic to new U.S. waters and critically endangered. I think the most recent estimates are that there might be as few as 34 of these species, and it was never known to science, and they are 40 feet long. Is that possible? And this involves North Carolina, so I wanted to present it to you. I was on a research boat in 2011, and we encountered them. Their habitat, or their primary habitat, is very restricted in the northern Gulf of Mexico. And at that time, it wasn't called Rice's whale. It was called a Brutus-like whale. The primary habitat, as I mentioned, is the northern Gulf of Mexico, and this documents some of the sightings. But anyway, mainly just the hotspot where this new species of whale has its primary habitat. So when one stranded in the Everglades alive and then died in January of 2019, a lot of people who have been studying this unusual whale wanted to do a great necropsy and collect every bone to investigate whether this truly is a new species. And this is that animal, about a 40-foot male. It had plastic in the stomach that had cut the stomach. Some people are confident that that was the cause of death, although there might have been other issues. And at this point, it was an unknown species. And I was contacted by folks from NOAA and the Smithsonian and many of the other collaborators about preparing these bones because we've done a little bit of this work before. Long story short, this is John Osowski in his Smithsonian truck towing a U-Haul trailer with the entire disassembled carcass of this huge stinky whale at the museum's Gallant Channel property in May 2019 because people decided that, hey, get Keith to do it. So I assembled a large group of co-workers, colleagues, and volunteers, and we set out to prepare the bones of this specimen, yet to be named, for the Smithsonian. So stinky beyond description, this is rolling the skull into what was soon going to become a huge compost pile of this soon to be named whale. This is that compost pile, wood chips, horse poop, and hay. And over a 5 or 6 month period, we monitored the moisture and the temperature and let the beetles and the bacteria digest the flesh off the bones. Hey, that's state of the art. And then in October of 2019, again, assembling a large group of colleagues and coworkers and volunteers, we exhumed the entire thing and that compost pile worked. And so this is the entire skeleton, that flipper, shoulder blade, ribs, lower jaw, the skull and the upper jaw, and all the vertebrae of that soon to be named species the day before we drove it up to the Smithsonian for study. I hope you're following me. I think Helen Aitken, who's watching this, sort of broke the story in the Maritimes Museum's newsletter, although it still hadn't been named yet. And then there was a big media rollout in January of this year when all the science was done at analyzing photo ID and genetics and morphometrics. And this was clearly a new species of whale in the Gulf of Mexico. And the media rollout continued. Some of it even mentions Bonehenge. Just the different media outlets, and there's a whole lot more. So you won't see this species in any books. You won't see this species on any posters yet. But if you search the web for Rice's whale, you will find these articles and much more that tells this story. And as it turns out, there is a record of what has now been determined to have been a Rice's whale that's stranded in North Carolina. It's not a pretty picture, but I want to show it to you. And Bill McClellan at UNCW investigated this, and of course it's a baleen whale, and there's the baleen there. It was horribly and lethally entangled. It's tragically a common cause of death, and this is that Rice's whale. So we have documented it in North Carolina. The new species on our list. But I didn't want to end with such a sad picture. So this is a Paula Daly photo of a humpback whale feeding right off Shackleford Banks in the background. Humpback whales, baleen whales, there's the baleen, barnacles on its lower jaw, and a bunch of terrified menhaden also in this picture. Thank you, Paula, for that wonderful photo. And this isn't just a polite thank you. This is a list of organizations and their volunteers and staff that I absolutely depend on a regular basis, or have contributed significantly financially to support everything I presented today. So warm, heartfelt thank you to them. And I've heard, it's on Facebook, so it must be true, if you're a North Carolina driver and you put one of these on your car, not only will you look younger and cooler and sexier, your car will go faster and last longer, and you help support this work, because the Friends of the Museum gets somewhere between around $10,000 a year from those of us who have Protect Wild Dolphins license plates available in North Carolina. Thank you for your interest, and I would love to hear if there are any more questions.
We do have a couple more questions. So Helen had a follow-up question regarding the melon. She wanted to know, would the melon filler differ in composition from species to species?
Wow. So yeah, let me know when you find the answer to that one. There are people who might approach being able to answer that. Ann Paps at UNCW comes to mind, because she teases out lots of what we would consider subtle differences in the soft tissue of cetaceans. I don't know. Just that's my short answer. No clue. Thanks for asking, though.
And we have another question from Lori. How often would you estimate a new species of whale is discovered within the science community?
Oh my. I'm gonna have to say I don't know, but in the last 15 years, 1, 2, 3, 4, this Rice's whale might be the 5th new to science whale species. I'd have to double check on that. So how often? Well, I can't predict. I just don't know. You're never sure until some dedicated people do the good science, actually study it. But I'll tell you one thing, and this is very exciting to me. There's a species of dolphin offshore. We call it an offshore bottlenose dolphin, but everything about it, genetics, range, parasite load, morphometrics, even external appearance, suggests it's different from our coastal bottlenose dolphin, Tursiops truncatus. And so I predict, in our lifetimes, soon, as soon as some dedicated researcher wants to do the taxonomy, that's going to be a new species. So the better we get and the harder we look, more will be discovered. I know I didn't answer your question, but hope that gives you an idea.
I think that concludes the questions that have been presented. If anybody else has any questions, definitely feel free to email Keith directly, or you can reach out to the museum and we'll relay them on to Keith. So once again, don't forget, check out our website, ncmaritimemuseum.com. NC Maritime Museum Beaufort.com to see what other lectures we have coming up. I have a lecture coming up on Thursday about sea monsters. That'll be Thursday at 11 o'clock. And then I believe next week on Thursday at 11 o'clock, we have David Bennett giving a presentation as well. So a lot of fun things going on. So once again, thank you, Keith. That was a wonderful presentation. And
Thank you.
we'll
Enjoyed it.
have the recording up on the website within the next few days.
All right, signing
I'm going to
off.
go ahead and end it, and we'll see everybody.
All right, thanks. It was fun.